Avat Yisrael who remembers everything. He just taught us that the segula for remembering things is to have Avat Yisrael. I think we have enough. Nir Menusi, everybody knows also, I think. He's been in Los Angeles. And what?
No.
You never met?
I've read your work. A little bit. Beautiful work.
Rabbi Ehrenberg was the Rosh Hashiva of the Rebbe's.
When is the next planned trip to LA?
After October 15th. Because
Like maybe touring.
Is that overrasked? Of a spiritual ailment that he feels far from Hashem. He can't daven, he can't learn, he can't help other people, meaning that his groan, his pain is because of some spiritual reason. Then he says it's even a greater sign of a desire called existential desire to return to God. He calls it a tshuva ma'aliso. That's the phrase. That's the whole saying for today. As though today is a day of Yiddish krechs, a Jewish groan coming from the heart and expressing once more an existential desire to return to one's source. We like, you probably all know from promotions and others that we like from learning our different writings that we like doing gematrias, numerical calculations of the key phrases that appear in some saying from the Torah. So here in this particular saying, it says the key words are tshuva gedelo, that if the groan comes from a physical not good, then it's a great tshuva. But if it comes from a spiritual not good, it's even more than that. It's a tshuva ma'aliso. It's a exalted tshuva. We know in general that there are two types of tshuva tato and tshuva yilo. There are two levels of tshuva, lower tshuva and higher tshuva. That it says in the Gemara that if one returns to Hashem in a lower state of tshuva, which is experiencing that he's far from Hashem, one just wants to come close, that converts and transforms his voluntary sins as though they were performed by mistake. It transforms willful sin to unwillful sin. But if one returns from the higher level of tshuva, which is either tshuva from great love of Hashem or tshuva from even with simcha, that not only he feels far and wants to come close, but he feels that he really is now clinging to Hashem, he's coming close, and he's close. That higher tshuva, that's what's alluded to in the phrase tshuva ma'aliso, from the word higher, exalted, elevated tshuva, that converts all of the voluntary sins into mitzvahs. It makes all of the bad that he did in his life, it makes it good, converts evil into good. That's the power, the great power of Tshuva, and that's the power to bring Geula, redemption to the world. As the Rambam says, that redemption will come when the Jewish people, when we all do Tshuva, the higher Tshuva. So if we take those two phrases, which are unique phrases, because it's not exactly the phraseology of the sages in the Gemara, it's the phraseology of the Lubavitcher Rebbe in this particular saying. The phrase Tshuva Gdela is not a normal phrase. Neither is the phrase Tshuva Mal Lisvei, a normal phrase that you'll find in Chazal. But obviously and definitely these phrases are intended to be exactly as they are. Tshuva Gdela and Tshuva Mal Lisvei. And together the numerical value of these two phrases added together is 2025, which in our meditation upon numbers, a number is a complete or a perfect number if it's a square, a perfect square. A perfect square means that it's a perfect state of hitkaladut, that each part, it's like a hologram, each part reflects the whole. That's a numerical sign of completion. Like in Shirat Omer, we count 49 days, 7 square, because there are 7 emotions of the heart, and each one contains all of them. So the perfection or completion of 7 is 7 squares. And this particular number that we've just now said, 2025, is a perfect square. It's a perfect square of 45. And 45 in itself is a very important number in Kabbalah, because it's the Hashem's name when written in full. It equals the word either Adam, man, like Adam HaRishon, the first man. Man is 45, numerically. And it equals the word ma, which means what, literally, but it's the word that Moshe Rabbeinu uses when he expresses his self-nullification and says, "V'nachnu ma," we are what? We are nothing. So that ma of Moshe Rabbeinu beribua, or Adam is also a permutation of the letters ma'od, to love Hashem with all of my might. Ma'od is Adam, squared are these 2 levels of tshuva. So today, according to this this pitkam, this phrase from saying from Hayom Yom, today is definitely there was a great groan 29 years ago. And when we remember something, that groan can return. Very interestingly, in Hebrew, the word groan, anacha, is related to another word which appears to be something different and even opposite, menucha. The 2-letter root of groan is nach. Nunchet. Nunchet means to rest. Menucha is rest. What rest is there in groaning? So apparently there is rest. If a person schlept a rois, that's the expression in Yiddish, from omikra, from all of the, this is in the saying of Hayom Yom, that he takes from the depth of his evil, takes out the whatever light is captured within that evil, and himself goes through a state of self-transformation from evil to ma'ato, that's the word there, to now standing in a place of good from his previous state of evil. So So that definitely is expressed by a feeling of peace. There's something that, some common denominator here between groan, which is a roish lepin mi'emek ra, the ma'amad tov, that's the words, and minuchat nefesh. So today is also a coming to that complete two-level, two-floor state of tshuva, and reaching the from that itself coming to a state of inner peace. And only from inner peace and rest can one continue to work, to do something positive in the world, which is obviously the tachlis, is that, as we said before, what the Rabbi wants from us now, as every tzaddik, is to continue b'yeter set, b'yeter oz, the work and the devotion and self-dedication that he had throughout his life to bring redemption to the world. It's now our task to realize his desire. And this day gives us the power. We have to have some groan, some oy, but at the same time, that can release negativity and then make us able to begin performing our true task and to come to the true end of Mordechai ki anaftabi. The Rabbi said that from the time that he was very, very young, a young child, 3-4 years old, he already knew a verse in Isaiah that says, Odcha Hashem ki anaftabi. I thank you, God, that you made it hard for me, all of the hardship. And he was referring not to the particular hardship of my person, but the hardship of the whole Jewish people. All of the sorrows that we've experienced throughout the millennia of Golus. And when will come the time that I can say with a complete heart, Odcha Hashem ki anaftabi, I thank you for all of the hardship that you've given me. That's going to only be if the transformation is so great and so ultimate that the good that comes out of the bad is infinite. The bad is finite. Maybe we'll explain this more. But the good is infinite. And when we see that the infinite good comes out of that finite bad, so we're happy, very happy. From the groan itself, from the anacha, once more from the anacha comes menucha, and comes pilut, action, and when the end is reached, the good end, then we're infinitely happy. That itself is olam haba, the world to come. So we'll say l'chaim, just for this is just the beginning. The first drop of l'chaim. There's a saying of the sages that appears in several places in the Midrash that there were 9 actually. It says 9 people, Tisha, shenichnesu b'chayehem b'gan Eden. 9 people that entered alive paradise, meaning that they did not taste the taste of death. And what's a chidush in this saying of Chazal is that these 9 people are not people that I would expect to be the greatest, like Moshe Rabbeinu or Avraham Avinu, and the other patriarchs and matriarchs. They're not the 9 people which go from a periphery. Much more 9 people I would never expect that these would be the people that entered a live paradise. Who were those 9 people? The first one, it says explicitly in the Torah, is called Chanoch ben Yared, the 7th generation from Adam, from Adam HaRishon. That it says that Hashem took him, all of the other people in the first 10 generations lived a long life of hundreds and hundreds of years. He relatively lived a very short life of just 365 years. And it says that Hashem took him before his time. And Chazal teach us, and Rashi brings that he was a tzaddik amor. He had no sin, but Hashem was afraid that if he'll live another day, maybe he'll sin. And that's why he took him away from this world before his time. But that taking away is like Eliyahu Hanavi, and it's another explicit one of these 9 is Elijah. That's one that I would expect, because the Torah says explicitly that he went up in fire to heaven and didn't die at all. So he went straight alive into Gan Eden, into paradise. But the previous figure that in Kabbalah is related to him and the first one is Chanoch ben Yared. So the first of the 9 that the sages enumerate that went straight into paradise, the first is Chanoch, and the second is Elijah, and the third is Mashiach, it says. That Mashiach also, even though Mashiach's in the future, hasn't yet arrived, that'll be a pshat, but he's enumerated as the third of the 9. Chanoch, Eliyahu, and Mashiach. And then the fourth is much more from now on it's totally unexpected. The fourth is Eliezer Eved Abraham. The reason we're bringing this is because it's related to Parashat Shavua, as we'll explain. The fourth is Eliezer, the servant of Abraham Avinu, was actually the person that was in charge of all of his household. The Mankal, the executive in chief of everything that Avraham Avinu did, including teaching the teachings of Avraham Avinu to the world at large. He was called Eliezer, Damesik Eliezer, Shedoleu Mashkeh Mitorat Rabo. He drew out and he gave drink the Torah, the teachings of his master to the whole world. He's a very important figure. Nonetheless, he's a slave, Eved Abraham Anochi. And Chazal says something very, very interesting about him. It says that actually he is either a direct descendant or a reincarnation of Canaan. Canaan is not only is Eretz Yisrael, our land called Eretz Canaan, Canaan, but Canaan is the son of Ham, the son of Noach, means the grandson of Noach. And the Torah relates that Noach actually cursed. Because of what Ham did to Noach, he cursed Ham's son, Canaan, and said, Arbur Canaan, Eved Abadim Yelechav. He will be a slave of slaves. It's Noach. And this figure, Canaan, appears in the Torah as Eliezer. But what do the Chazal say about Eliezer? Yatsa michlal harur v'nichnas bichlal baruch. Eliezer, maybe the greatest thing that he did is he was the one to make the shidduch, the match between Yitzchak Avinu, Isaac, and Rebecca, and the Rivka Imenu. Abraham Avinu sent him to Haran to find a wife for his only son from Sarah, Yitzchak, and he succeeded in making the match, meaning that all of us, all the Jewish people, descends from this match which was made by Eliezer Eved Abraham. It says at that moment that he made the match, he came out of the state of curse and entered the state of blessedness. And not only did he become blessed because of the shidduch that he made, but because of that virtue and that merit, he didn't die a normal death. We'll try to explain this more to make it palatable to our ears and understanding what it means that he entered a live paradise. So he's the fourth one, once more, the fourth one, and the first who was totally unexpected that he would be one of these nine. Then comes another figure that maybe we don't even never heard of. The following one is also one that we never heard of, but this one also, his name is Eved Melech HaKushi. The story that appears at the end of Yirmiyahu, Navi Yirmiyahu, that Jeremiah, who prophesied the destruction of the first temple, so he aroused the wrath of the king and all of the other officers of the Jewish people at that time, and he was thrown into a pit, and he would have certainly died there in this pit. And it was a deep pit. Pit is full of snakes and scorpions. One of the officers, this is the pshat of the verse, one of the officers of the king, whose name was Eved Melech HaKushi. Tzidkiyahu was called Melech HaKushi, like Aisha Kushit. Kushi is Ethiopian. But it means that just as a Kushi, his skin is black, so is this king totally good. Tzaddik Gamur, just the very opposite. In any event, but this figure is not the king himself. He's the servant once more, like Eliezer is Eved Abraham. He's a Eved. He's the servant of this king. And he ran to the king and said that the prophet Jeremiah, that everyone had some knowledge and respect for him as a prophet, is going to die if he's not taken out of the pit. And so the king heard him and received his words and took 30 people to pull him out, to lower a rope into the pit and to pull him out of the pit. So Jeremiah was pulled out of the pit and he remained alive. And in that merit, the one who was responsible for it, thanks to him, this Eved Melech HaKushi, he entered a live paradise. A totally unknown figure. In Chazal, there are different opinions even who he was. Some say that this was actually the Talmid, the disciple of Jeremiah, Baruch ben Ariah. But from the pshat of the pasuk, it's not that. It's some anonymous figure, Eved Melech HaKushi. The next one also is one that we don't, maybe never heard of. His name is Ya'abatz ben Rabbeinu HaKadosh, ben Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi. Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, who compiled the Tana, who compiled the Mishnah, the Torah Sheba'al Peh. So there are two Girsaot here. Either he had a son or he had a grandson, whose name is Ya'abatz, Yud Ayin Bet Tzadik. And without even telling a story of why he merited to enter paradise alive, the Chazal just say that he is one of the 9 that entered paradise alive. So how many do we have so far? We have 6. So far 6 people. Now what's also significant and interesting is up until now we just had men, just males. What about females? Are there any women that entered paradise alive? So Chazal say there are two women that entered paradise alive. Batya Bitya Bat Paro, the princess, the daughter of Pharaoh, who saved Moshe Rabbeinu, and who actually took him became a stepmother of Moshe Rabbeinu, and took him into the household of Pharaoh and raised him, brought him up, educated him. She's such a great figure there. In the Zohar it says that she has a whole heichal, a whole chamber in paradise of righteous women, that they all study together in paradise, together with Bitya Bat Paro, the princess of Egypt. So she, in the schus of saving and raising the Redeemer and the giver of the Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu, she entered paradise alive. Then the next one is one that we might have expected, Serach Bat Asher. The daughter of Asher, her name is Serach, and her great schus is that she brought the good tidings to Jacob that Joseph is still alive. After the brothers returned with that saying, but no one was able to approach Jacob and be able to give him the tiding. She did it with song. We find this figure of Serach Bat Asher appearing hundreds of years later in the Bible. Chazal say that she lived a long life, or never. We don't find at all that she died. And in this particular same Chazal, she is one of the 9 that entered directly into paradise, into Gan Eden. Who's the last? So now we have 8 already. It's given this particular category of souls. This saying of Chazal creates a particular category that we have to understand. Category of souls that enter paradise alive. Once more, there are hundreds of other sayings of different categories. This is a particular category. In this category, there are 2 women and 7 men, which is a much greater proportion than, for instance, the category of how many male prophets are there in the Jewish people and how many female prophetess there are. If we remember, there are 48 male prophets and 7 female. So what's the ratio of 7 to 48? It's almost 1 to 7. But here the ratio in this particular category, the ratio is 2 to 7. So 2 to 7 is much more than 7 to 48. It's just a peripheral observation. The last one is Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, who's a known sage. The last generation of the Tanaim, the first generation, or he overlaps the first generation of the Amoraim. He's the one that the Gemara tells the story that he went and met the soul of Mashiach, and he was the one that asked the Mashiach when you're coming, and the Mashiach answered him, today. And then when Mashiach didn't come that day, he went to Eliyahu Navi and complained that the Mashiach is a liar. He lied to me. He said, Ayom. So what was the answer? The answer was that he's not a liar. He just was referring to a verse in Psalms that says, Hayom im bekolot tishma'u. Today, if you'll hearken to his voice. Meaning that it came back, the Tanai came back on us. That we have to hearken to Hashem's voice, and the Mashiach will come today, right now. Today means now, immediately. So again, he's such a great figure, this figure, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, of all of the sages. Once more, they're great sages. And the greatest of the sages, Rabbi Akiva, not only did he not enter alive Gan Eden, but he died with tremendous suffering. He's one of the central figure of the 10 martyrs of the Jewish people. So we see that once more it's totally not simple logic. Who fits into what category of souls? But the one sage of all of the Tanaim and all of the Amoraim that entered alive paradise is Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. There are obviously many, many things that he says and that he does in the Talmud that make him the one to merit to this category of Nichnasu b'chayehem b'Gan Eden. All right, so these are the 9. There are different girsaot of the 9, but this is the consensus of the different opinions of who are the 9. So once more, the number 9 is definite. It's 9. It's not 8. It's not 10. It's 9. And even though there are some different opinions as to who are the 9, but this is the consensus. Once more, if we, as we like to calculate the gematria of a set, this category is a set, and then take the average value of all of these 9. So just say it in short, the average value of all of these 9 equals 274. It's all 9 together. The chance that the number is a multiple of 9 is 1 in 9. It's a small chance, but the total number of all of these 9 figures is a multiple of 9. And it's 9 times 274. Meaning that the average value of the 9 figures that we just said equals this number 274 is also a very important figure in the Tanakh, Mordechai. And why do I mention this? Because the Rebbe today is and the reason that we're saying that this whole drush of entering alive is because of the Rebbe. The Rebbe identified more than with any other biblical figure. In a certain sense, even Moshe Rabbeinu, he identified himself with Mordechai. That Mordechai is in Galut. It says that Mordechai b'doro ke Moshe b'doro. that Mordechai in his generation is like Moses in his generation. He's a Redeemer. Nonetheless, there's a particular hue and taste to Mordechai HaYehudi, lo yichra v'lo yishtachave. He doesn't bow down to foreign culture, we'll call it. He remains firm as a proud Jew that believes 100%, 1,000 and 1,000,000% in the tradition of the Jewish people. When the previous Rabbi, his father-in-law, came to America, so he said a famous also maxim, the maxim of the Frierdiker Rebbe is, America is nicht anders. America is not different. Because most of the Jewish people that had come 100 years ago to America, so America is explicitly would say that America is different. You can't demand in America to be a Jew as in Vilna. But Vilna and America are two different worlds. It's a different world altogether. So the very first thing that the Frierdiker Rebbe strongly emphasized that America is not different. America is the same as Vilna and Warsaw, and all of the centers of Jewish culture throughout the Golos of European Golos, the old Alte Heim. So the Rebbe extended that. They brought it into American Hawaii or American life, and into life around the whole world, because he established centers around the whole world. That to be a chosid and to be an hog of a full-term Jewish chassid that doesn't relinquish even the smallest minhag Israel, at the same time is together with everything that's going on, all of life, and loving every Jew, loving every soul, and embracing every Jew, and bringing back to belief in God and to belief in the Torah and to walking a Jewish life. So once more, this is all to say that the Rebbe himself would say, is obviously the day that he said it the most is on Purim, but it was very, very clear that the Rebbe identifies with this figure of Mordechai perhaps more than any other figure in the tradition, Mordechai HaYehudi. So he is, once more, b'hashgacha pratit, the average value of these 9. What's even more for me amazing is that the first 3 of these figures, which are the expected 3, which are Chanoch and Eliyahu and Mashiach. So if we substitute the term that's used in the Midrash, in Chazal is Mashiach, but we know that Mashiach, his name is Tzemach Shmo, it says in the Tanakh, and Tzemach equals Menachem, that's why it says in the Gemara that his name is Menachem. And if we substitute for the word Mashiach Menachem, then these first 3 figures, which are Chanoch, Eliyahu, Menachem, together are also equal exactly the same number of 274. Mordechai, which is the average value of all of the 9. This number 274 has equals other things. It equals 2 very important pairs of souls in the Torah. The pair of the 2 sisters that Jacob, the Bechir Sheba'avot, the choice of the patriarchs, married two sisters, which is forbidden according to the Torah. But he was before Matan Torah. So he was able to marry these two figures, and according to the Rizal, these two figures, even though they're two different personas, but they're actually two different dimensions of one all-inclusive soul. It's a Leah v'Rachel, a concealed dimension and a revealed dimension. Leah is the concealed dimension, and Rachel is the revealed dimension. And together, those two souls, more feminine souls, and Leah plus Rachel also is 274. Another pair, which is an anti, we're going to talk now about anti-souls. An anti-pair of this number 274 is the pair that we're going to read here in Eretz Yisrael in the Torah next week, of those two souls that wanted to curse the Jewish people. The king Balak and we'll call him the non-Jewish prophet, the greatest of the non-Jewish prophets, Bilam, who had the power of tongue, of speech, an anti-Moshe Rabbeinu, as Chazal say. That is, the power of the Jewish people in general, and especially of the leader of the Jewish people, is by his word. And the one who had the power of word and speech on the other, it's called the other side, the negative side, the evil side, is Bilam. And that pair, the king who brought him, and the prophet who intended to curse us, Chas v'Shalom, also equals 274. Balak and Bilam. So Balak and Bilam is 274, Leah and Rachel is 274, Mordechai is 274, and now we discovered another thing, which is Chanoch, Eliyahu, Menachem, a triplet, which is also the same, the identical number, 274. And this is once more. So all of this was once more to try to understand, at least, first of all for myself, what it means. Obviously, we're thinking now of significance of this day of Gimel Tammuz. What it means to enter paradise alive. What is it? In another related, we said that there are different categories of soul. There's another, the closest category, which is almost the same thing as entering paradise alive, is a saying of Chazal that there were so and so in one place it says 13 different souls. Some of them are the same as the 9. Some of them are different from the 9. 13 souls that did not taste the taste of death. And then it said there are 10 souls that entered paradise alive. So it's not exactly, it's related, but it's not exactly the same thing. Did you, the last few classes that we had on Kant, did you do it in English yet? Not yet. The last few weeks we've been discussing, or we'll call it converting, as we like to do, to convert from the outside world, different philosophies or different souls. So we've been talking about Kantian philosophy. And now the Niflaot, the wonders in Hebrew, is called Niflaot. It's not here. So the basic ma'amar in this week's, you can really show it, Hishpah. Tiftach. Whoever reads Hebrew or wants to learn Hebrew, so this is the best way to learn Hebrew. The major article here is on the critique of aesthetics. It counts three basic works of philosophy are on aesthetics and ethics and metaphysics, which is actually religion, belief in God. At the same time that Chassidut was being revealed in the world in the 18th century by the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid and the Alter Rebbe. So in Germany, there were perhaps definitely the greatest music, which is the greatest of all is Beethoven, but before him there's Bach and Mozart, Haydn, and the greatest philosophy. For the Rambam, the greatest philosopher was Aristotle. But from the Renaissance on, he was already out. But the greatest philosopher of modern time, and perhaps we can say, since it's of modern time, we can say of all time, the obviously non-Jewish philosophy is Kant, because all of those that followed him, all of them take and base themselves on different aspects of his philosophy. Both of these phenomena of music and philosophy are called achoraim. When God reveals something in the world, he reveals much more twofold. The pneumius, or the inner soul, and the outer back. It's called achoraim, the back expression. The back expression can be a much more developed expression, but it's back because it's unconscious. The back is unconscious of God. But it's coming, it's a back expression of the true front. The great light of the revelation of the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe, which came together. One of the aspects is music. Whoever knows Hasidic Negina. So this we've been explaining for the last 50 years and more, that the backside of that is classical music. And much more the epitome is Beethoven. And the backside of the thought of the philosophy of Chassidut, they both appeared in Germany, which afterwards became Yamach Shemam. And much more the backside of the philosophy of Chassidut is Kantian philosophy, which much more appears exactly at the same time. I said, why are we saying this all now again? Because this week, this was the topic of aesthetics, and last week was also the topic. And I hope that maybe next week it will also be the topic. That depends on him. But he has to like it, what we're saying. If he likes it enough, then it becomes a topic. In the Tanakh, in the Bible, there's the most mysterious word the most Kabbalistic, mysterious word. What is it in the whole Bible? So this is something that we all know, and all of the Talmudim, that the secret word of the Bible is Chashmal. Which is the basis also of all of the thought, the deep thought and the innovation of the Baal Shem Tov. Chashmal, Chashmal. Silence and speech simultaneous. Which means concealment and revelation simultaneous. That's a word that appears in the Merkavah, the vision of the chariot of Yechezkel, which is the deepest part of the Tanakh, according to Chazal. And in that vision itself, the secret word, which is not understood, is this word Chashmal, which appears 3 times. If I would ask now the question, what is the secret word of philosophy? And especially as we're saying, the greatest is Kant, so the Kantian philosophy.
Subjective. Subjective.
Subjective is not a secret. Subjective is
impossible to define.
So I understand what subjective means. You also understand what it means. The secret word is, obviously it's a translation from German, but in English, the secret word which appears throughout all of the 3 critiques of reason and aesthetics and ethics is the words, in English it's the word sublime. Sublimity, sublime. It's such a secret word that all of the interpreters of Kant to the present day can't even properly define what it means in his thoughts.
That's what's called Kant. Kant.
He calls it the experience. It's experience. Sublime is an experience. It's the experience of infinite great. It's an experience which arises from a sense of aesthetic, of beauty. So what we're now going to say is that in the East, what is the greatest experience in Nirvana? For Kant, this is a corresponding state to experience and to enter into a state of the sublime. So what we're going to say is that entering paradise alive is to experience the sublime and remain there. Which was from the East, it's like entering a state of nirvana and just staying there. So at the same time, he doesn't taste the taste of death, and he enters paradise alive. Since these 9 figures that Chazal say are so unique and individual and unexpected, as we said before, but each one has a reason, like Serach Bat Asher. Her reason is because she brought the tidings of Od Yosef Chai to Yaakov Avinu. It must be that there's something in this, the virtue of what she did, that she merits experiencing the sublime and entering and living forever and entering paradise alive. what we explained here in short in this week's Niflaot is that the whole principle, the aesthetic principle, corresponds to the inner dimension of the crown of the superconscious. It's called atik yomi, pleasure. Because that's exactly the way he defined it, that aesthetics is the essential pleasure of the soul. It's called purposiveness without a purpose. Tachlit lelo tachlit. Because it's just pure experience of the sublime. Is there anything above that in Kabbalah and Chassidut? There is. In the East and the West, there isn't. Because according to Kabbalah, even this inner dimension of the superconscious has a corresponding state in Klipat Noga. But the very highest level doesn't have a corresponding state. And that's pure faith, which is the origin of the power, the innate power of the Jewish soul to give up his life for God in the Torah, self-sacrifice, Mesirut Nefesh. What's more, Rabbi Akiva had Mesirut Nefesh. He didn't enter paradise alive. Where is that coming from? That's coming from Radla, from the unknowable head. Now we'll say another very important introduction. There are three heads of the crown, three super-conscious levels of the soul. The lowest one is called Ratzon. We said that in this article here, we say that that's the ethics that corresponds to ethical teachings on the other of culture in general, but obviously in Kedusha and sanctity is the ethics of the Torah, like Pirkei Avot. Above that is the ascetic principle of purposiveness without purpose, in the words of Kant. But above that is pure faith. What we're now saying, how's another way to understand these three levels? The superconscious crown, the three levels which are called will and pleasure and faith. The sublime is pleasure. Nirvana is pleasure. Entering paradise alive is also pleasure. Below that is will, but above that is faith. Once from faith comes Mesirut Nefesh. But faith is something which is totally undefinable. Because it's the opposite of intelligence. It's not intelligence. It's not seichel. It's faith. Even what faith is undefinable. Pleasure is definable. Will is certainly definable. But what is the common denominator of all of these three? All of these three, relative to consciousness begins with wisdom. First, conscious power of the soul. In Kabbalah, the wisdom is tzimtzum. Is the point of tzimtzum is contraction. Because above consciousness is a state of infinity, no limits to it. The consciousness begins by making limitation. The wisdom itself is called tzimtzum. It's limiting the infinite light and just taking a part of it that I can now consciously integrate, experience and integrate. But in the experience of the infinite, which are all the three higher levels of the crown, it's different. One verse reads in Psalms, Ma Rabu Ma'asecha Hashem, how great are your workings, Hashem. Ma Rabu means that actually it's infinitely great. Ma Rabu. Another verse reads, Ma Gadlu Ma'asecha Hashem. That's how Ma Rabu means how many are your works, Hashem. The corresponding verse reads, Ma Gadlu Ma'asecha Hashem, how great are your workings, Hashem. What's the difference between how many and how great? So this is one of the examples in the Torah that the Torah explicitly differentiates between quantity and quality. Marabu Ma'asecha Hashem is quantitative. As we all know, science now, what is modern science from the Renaissance on? It's negating qualitative categorization and establishing pure quantitative measurement. Science is totally quantitative, as we'll explain. That means it's totally the lower, it originates from the lower level of the crown, which is quantity. If I say the word infinity, so infinity can either be quantitative infinity or qualitative infinity. Quantitative infinity, I understand, it's like a mathematical infinity. It's quantitative. What do I mean by Gadluma? Qualitative infinity? Qualitative infinity is exactly the way Kant describes the experience of the sublime. That it's infinitely great. What does it mean, great? By me saying the word great is not many. It's not infinitely many. It's infinitely great. Great is qualitative, eichut. So this is also the difference between the outer dimension of the crown. All of the crown is infinite. But the outer dimension, which is will, is relatively quantitative. And the inner dimension, which is pleasure, is relatively qualitative. What about the higher level? The highest level, which is pure faith, from which comes Mesirus Nefesh. That's a state of true and absolute paradox, that it's both infinite and finite simultaneously. As it says in Kabbalah, that Hashem himself is not just infinite, because if he would just be infinite, he would be lacking finitude. So he must be both infinite and finite at the same time. That's a paradox. Not only is he both infinite and finite simultaneously, but he is neither infinite nor finite at all. That's all. Reisha de lo yada v'lo yityada. Both infinite and finite simultaneously, and neither infinite nor finite at all. That's our faith in God, from which comes our Kuach HaMesirut Nefesh. So this is a very important understanding of the three levels. And then once more, when we enter consciousness, we have to immediately contract all of these levels of infinity and just begin from a point of light, Yehi Or, but a finite point of light. which is the light of with the flash. Wisdom is called a flash across the mind. But that flash is light, but it's finite. And from that evolves all of the other powers, conscious powers of the soul. Right, so now what we'll conclude with is that we had all these unique souls that entered paradise alive. But as we said, what about the greatest souls like Abraham Avinu and Moshe Rabbeinu? Well, they're not one of these. Where are they? So now we'll bring it to Parashat Shavua. And Parashat Shavua Haba. Parashat Shavua is Chukat, and Parashat Shavua Haba is Balak, here in Israel. In Balak, we already mentioned some allusion to Balak and Bilam. We'll start from here. Moses, the greatest figure in the Torah, has several different anti-souls. Several years ago we had a series of classes on what we called it the illuminated side and the dark side of the soul. Something similar to good and evil. The illuminated side of our soul and the dark side of our soul. We related it also to science, because at that time there were many scientific articles came out on dark matter and dark energy. How the universe is more dark than it is illuminated. 90% dark. So we try to understand it vis-a-vis the soul, the light and the dark. So every great soul, even the Rebbe, today is the day of the Rebbe, so that every of the greatest souls, the leaders of every generation, had an anti-soul that opposed them, that they were in conflict with and had to overcome. Now, some great souls, in different periods of their life, from period to period, the anti-soul changes. They have many anti-souls, depending on what particular phase of their own life they're going through right now. And the greatest example of this is Moses, who was the greatest soul. He's totally positive. Ayin Tova, Hu Goel Rishon, Hu Goel Acharon. He is the first Redeemer. He will return to be the final Redeemer. Ultimately, when the final Redeemer comes, so he must have already overcome all of his anti-energies, and then everything will be good. But until that happens, so still there are anti-expressions and energies that are in conflict, that create conflicts, great, tremendous conflicts with the greatest of the souls, the leader of every generation. Take an example in Chassidut. Who was the anti-soul of the Alter Rebbe, first Rebbe of Chabad? Says that the anti-soul was Napoleon. So that's what we're taught. It was his anti. And by the Baal Shem Tov had an anti. Everyone, every great soul and leader has some anti-soul, at least one, but often many from time to time. Who was the first anti-soul of Moses that he had to overcome at the beginning of his life? After he was brought up, we'll now see how great was Batya, the princess who brought up Moshe Rabbeinu. Apparently she brought him up to be a very proud Jew, that you're a Jewish soul, and you're part of the Jewish people. So what was the first thing that he did? It's called Reshit Darko Shugo El Yisrael, the first act of Moses in the Torah. What was his first thing that he did? He killed HaMitzri. The word HaMitzri equals Moses. 345. So we're taught that this Mitzri that he killed was actually his anti-person. If you have an anti-person, you have to kill him. That's number one. Because he was oppressing, why did he kill him? Because he was smiting, hitting his brethren, his Jewish brothers. So yeah, that means that he really had a good education, Moshe Rabbeinu. So he was a young man, different opinions of just exactly how old he was at this time. But that's the first thing it says in the Torah, that he had this anti-soul that he had to overcome. And because he did kill him, so actually it made it hard for him. Pharaoh wanted to kill him, Moses. He had to run away. His whole life, he was pursued. His whole life, he was pursued spiritually because he killed this Egyptian. It's also a very great thing that a person does one thing in his youth, and he suffers from it his whole life, even if he's the greatest soul in the world. But once again, this is the first experience. Who comes afterwards? Sometimes, no, a person has an anti. Sometimes he knows that he's anti, but he's not afraid of him. Just the opposite. He kills him. Sometimes he is afraid of him because he's such a strong anti-figure that he's afraid. Moshe Rabbeinu himself who was the first one that he's afraid of. He's afraid of Pharaoh. When God tells him, Hashem tells him to come to Pharaoh. So it says, don't be afraid of him. I'm going to come with you together. Well, Paro. Paro is the great crocodile in the Nile. Moses is wisdom. Wisdom is Tzimtzum's contraction, as we just now explained. But Pharaoh's Keter has some infinite power to him relative to Moses. That's why he's afraid of him. Nonetheless, in order to release and redeem the Jewish people from the Egyptian exile, Moses has to overcome Pharaoh. Says that's the difference between Moses and Aaron. Says that both Moses and Aaron, the two brothers, were part of were active, each one in his way, in the called the process of redemption. It said that Moses had to fight Pharaoh, and Aaron had to arouse the Jewish people to desire to be redeemed. So actually Aaron had to do with the Jewish people, but Moses had to fight his second great anti-figure, who was the Pharaoh. Who's another anti? This Chumash that we're now reading Bamidbar is full of anti-Moses figures. But who's the greatest? Which last week? Korach stood up and objected the leadership of Moses, especially the leadership to appoint his brother Aaron as the high priest. But in general, who made you, who put you as the spokesman and to make all the decisions and appoint all of the appointments of the Jewish people? It says that Mashiach will only come when the Korach of that generation, of our generation, acknowledges the Moses of the generation. I mean, in every generation there's a Moses and there's a Korach. Another very important pair of anti-souls. What's important about this anti is that even though Moses made this great miracle of the earth opening up its mouth and devouring, swallowing up Korach v'Choladato, his sons remained alive. They didn't enter paradise alive, but they remained alive in hell, as it were. From his children came out very, very great souls like Shmuel, Hanavi, Ramati, or Shakul, who weighs Keneged Moshe and Aaron, and all of the singers in the temple. That's so once more, he's an totally anti-soul, but within the Jewish people, and ultimately he will reunite positively with Moses. Then the verse reads, Tzaddik katamar yifrach, the tzaddik will sprout as a tamar, as a date tree. The final letters of that phrase spells Korach. Then, once more next week, we have an anti-soul of Moses, Bilam. V'lo kam od b'Yisrael k'Moshe. At the very end of the Torah, it says that no prophet rised up in the Jewish people as Moses. It says in the Jewish people. So Chazal read this, that in the Jewish people there was no prophet as Moses. But in the non-Jewish world, you see here how important for Chazal is the comparison of the Jewish world versus the non-Jewish world. I'll try to explain why. The whole Torah begins with the non-Jewish world. 19 generations of non-Jewish world before the first generation of the Jewish world. In the non-Jewish world, there is a prophet comparable to Moses. And who is he? Bilam. We mentioned before. So here we have another soul who's definitely, explicitly the anti-version of Moses. But there's one more after all of these that we mentioned. One more that appears at the end, the very end, the last two verses of the last Rashi of Parashat Chukat that we're reading here in Israel this Shabbos. And his name is Og Melech HaBashan. Og, the king of the Bashan. And when Moses fought, according to Chazal, there are two brothers, Sichon Melech HaEmori and Og Melech HaBashan. And Hashem told him to begin to inherit the Jewish land for the Jewish people. Begin to be the final redeemer. Up until now you were the first redeemer of the Jewish people from Egypt. But in order to be the final redeemer, you have to actually do the work of what your disciple Yehoshua is going to continue after your death, which is coming into the Jewish land and the land of Israel and capturing it and inheriting it. But you begin on the other side. And you begin with these two kingdoms that were ruled by these two brothers who, according to Chazal, were already alive in the time of the flood, and afterwards in the time in the period of Abraham Avinu. So Sichon, the first one, went well. The Jewish people fought and were victorious over Sichon, inherited his land. But the second one, who is Og Melech HaBashan, so Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu, Al tira oto, ki biyadcha natati oto. Don't be afraid of him, because I have given him into your hand. And then it says, Vayaku oto v'yet panav v'yet kol artzo, that they smote him and his sons and all of his land. And even though it says in the plural, Vayaku, they smote, this is a sicha of the Rebbe, you know, we're concluding with the sicha of the Rebbe, that it says in the plural, they smote, but Rashi says, Moshe harago, Moses killed him. He was a giant. He was the only one that remained Yeter Harafayim. In prehistory, in Mesopotamia, there were giants, like dinosaurs. And they all were wiped out by the four kings, it says. But there was one who remained, Og Melech HaBashan. Now, if Moses had special fear of him, why does he have fear of him? Because he says, the Chazal say that he did something for Abraham. He was alive in the time of Abraham, hundreds of years before. And he did some favor, something good for Abraham. And Moses was afraid that the merit that he had by doing this favor for Abraham would stand for him, and that Moses would not be able to capture him, to defeat him. So Hashem says, don't fear him. One opinion in Chazal is that actually this Og was a part of the household that Nimrod had given Og after Abraham miraculously came out of the furnace that Nimrod had cast him into because of his faith in God and his breaking of the idols of his father. So Nimrod gave him as a gift to Abraham, this young boy Abraham. He gave him a slave, Og. So he was actually brought up in the household. According to this opinion, he was brought up in the household of Abraham. And when God commanded Abraham at the age of 99 to circumcise himself, he had to circumcise himself in his whole household. So he also circumcised him. And because of that, Moses was afraid of the merit of the circumcision. That's one opinion. But that's not the opinion of Rashi. Rashi says simply because he came after in the war against the five kings, that the four kings were victorious and they took captive Lot, the nephew of Abraham. And then Vayavu Palit, there was one who one survivor of the losers of the war, that he came just like he was also a survivor of the flood. He was afterwards a survivor of this war, and he came to tell Abraham that his nephew had been taken captive. And then Abraham took his servant, his slave Eliezer, whose name equals 318, and that's why it says in the Torah they took 318 people. But Chazal say that all of those 318 people is all just one person, Eliezer himself, who is one of our people that entered paradise alive. And they went and they defeated all the greatest Ma'atzama, the greatest empire of the world of that time, who was the four kings, Lord Omer and his other kings. And they brought back, they redeemed, they rescued Lot and brought him back. So because that Og did this favor to Abraham by telling him that Lot had been taken captive, so Moses was afraid of him. This is the opinion that Rashi goes by, which is in the Gemara. There's a very great kasha, that's question that's asked on this opinion. At the same place, Chazal say that what was Og's deep intention. His deep motivation was that he told Abraham that his nephew had been taken captive. He knew Abraham would pursue and make war, so he intended, he hoped that Abraham would be killed and that he would marry Sarah. That's what he had in mind. So the question is asked, if a person has such a bad intention, how can that be a merit for him, that he did Abraham a favor? And the answer that's given is that Eino Chinam, it doesn't matter. He had his bad intention in mind, his bad motivation. But he was responsible for arousing in Abraham his own Mesirus Nefesh to save his nephew and to make war and to defeat all of these kings who were all evil. And that was a very, very good thing. After he killed so many people, Abraham is a man of chesed, of loving kindness. He's not into killing people. So Abraham himself, it says, was afraid after this war that he had lost all of his good deeds in his life. So Hashem had to console Abraham and say, Al tira Avram, Scharchar beimo, don't be afraid, Abraham. You still have great merit and great reward is coming to you. Scharchar beimo'od, the Arizal says that the initial letters spell Moses, that your great reward, which is coming because of your Mesirut Nefesh to defeat these kings, actually that Moses will be born to you. So once more, so we find here Og appearing with Abraham. Chazal say another amazing thing. Chazal say that Og is Eliezer. Not only these two people, Abraham's two people, but they're the same person. That Og Melech HaBashan is Eliezer. Eliezer, but now we have a contradiction.
Paradox.
A paradox. Eliezer entered paradise alive. And Og, Moses killed him. So how is this explained in Kabbalah, this paradox? It's explained in the very same way. It's one soul that has two sides, a good side and a bad side. And when Eliezer came out of a state of being cursed, and entered a state of being Baruch, Bo Baruch Hashem. So that's just like it says in the Midrash of this week's portion of Parah Adumah, Mi yiten tahor mitamei lo echad. Who will extract pure from impure, if not the one and only one, who is the bearer of paradox? There's a soul, who the total soul in the beginning it's all og. The word og means circle. They're circle and straight, called nefesh veruach, space and time. First there's the circle, and then comes the line. Og is the circle, and Moses is the line, is the straight. So that's like space and time. We can't now go into greater depth right now. But Og is the circle, which is space. And Moses is the line that has to fight, but he's afraid of him. Just like he's afraid of Pharaoh, who's also the circle around the line. But this is especially apparent in Og. And Og was once more a giant, a tremendous giant. And also lived a tremendously long life, according to the Midrash of Chazal. How much, so once more, Eliezer is an extract of this original Og. Eliezer is Og. Og is Eliezer, but Eliezer is taken out of Og. He's mi ten tahor mitamei. He comes out of Og and becomes now blessed. And this particular dimension was Eliezer the Eved Abraham that makes the shidduch Yitzchak and Rivka. He's the one that enters paradise alive. He experiences the sublime. And at the same time, Og, who's now, the good has been taken out of him already several generations before, 7 generations before. But still, apparently, there's still sparks. In every klipa, in every shell, there are sparks of Buddha that have to be extracted. That's called the secret of the 288 sparks. It's only when they're all extracted from the evil can redemption come. And that's what Moses does. Killing is not just negating and nullifying the existence and essence of that person. If Moses kills someone, as he first kills them, Moses is very interesting. His life begins, his career begins by killing the Mitzri. And his career ends by killing Og. And he suffered tremendously from killing the Mitzri. But Og, when he kills Og, it's a final tikkun, and a final tikkun for Og himself. If the Torah says that someone there's a capital punishment, what does that capital punishment accomplish? Why kill a Jew? That capital punishment, ideally, is the ultimate tikkun of that soul, rectification of that soul, especially if he confesses before he's killed, according to the Torah. But even if he doesn't confess, like in the state of Og, whatever final tikkun has to be performed on this soul, on this giant, who is now representative of all the giants, of all of the dinosaurs of prehistory. So that's what Moses accomplishes at the end by killing Og. So actually there are 2 pairs. There's Abraham and Eliezer is one pair. And the corresponding pair is Moses and Og. The two phases of tikkun of this very great anti-soul. At the beginning it's Canaan who becomes Eliezer. And then what remains is the Og Melech HaBashan. Actually, Chazal say that when Og came to tell Abraham that Lot had been captured, taken captive, so immediately his reward was that Hashem made him the king of Bashan, Og Melech HaBashan. But then finally Moses has to kill him. So there are two pairs. One pair is Abraham and Eliezer. According to the Arizal, Eliezer also afterwards goes through, even though he's already blessed, but he goes through other stages of tikkun, more and more and more, because he was originally Canaan. Finally, he himself becomes Mashiach, Eliezer. He becomes, first he becomes Joseph. Then he reincarnates and becomes Kalev ben Yefuneh. And then he reincarnates again and becomes Benayahu ben Yehoyada, the commander-in-chief of David and Shlomo HaMelech. And then finally becomes Mashiach. Mashiach becomes the greatest of the great and the redeemer of the redeemers, comes from the cursed of the cursed. This is the paradox, or the secret of creation. Mi tentahor mitame. So once more we have the pair, Eliezer and Abraham. How much do they equal together? Let's do that. This is the final one. Abraham plus Eliezer. Eliezer is in the gematria that appears explicitly in the Torah, 318. Abraham is Ramachi Barim, so it's 566. 566 equals Mashiach ben Yosef. Eliezer becomes Yosef, the Arizal says. So the fact that ultimately becomes Mashiach, that's called Mashiach ben Yosef. What remains is the tikkun of Moses and Og. That's this week's portion. How much do they equal? Moshe is your Moshe. So you also must have an anti, it's called Og.
No, I don't have any.
How much is Moshe plus Og? Mizeh, Mazeh.
יהדות. משיח בן דוד.
Mashiach ben David. No, Yadut is one more, 425. So this is Gematrias are either good or very good, or very, very, or sometimes bad. But but this one is very, very good. That the first pair, it's all the same souls coming back. The first pair of Abraham and Eliezer is equals together Mashiach ben Yosef. And then the second, the final pair, which is Moses plus Og, equals Mashiach ben David coming. So again, Moses, in order to become the final Redeemer, has to kill and thereby rectify and unite with Og. There's no other person in the Jewish people could accomplish this. This was a task, a unique task of Moses. That's why, and this is the final Rashi. But even though it says Vayaku Lashon Rabim, but Rashi says Moshe Harago. Moses killed him. Only Moses can kill him. Now it says that all of these souls of Abraham and Eliezer and Moshe and Lot, they all also relate to another soul that we mentioned already. The soul that Abraham went with Mesiras Nefesh to save was Lot, his nephew. He is the great-great-grandfather of Ruth HaMoaviyah. It's called Ema Malchut, from which from whom, and then the other one, Naama Amonit, from which descend Mashiach ben David. So all of these souls, this is now the deep thing in the Arizal, the long discussions in the Arizal of the relationship between all of these souls that we've now said, Moses and Og and Abraham and Eliezer and Lot is another one. This whole general soul of Og, from which comes out Eliezer, and it's all related to Lot ben Haran, the nephew of Abraham. It's all called the backside of Ze'er Anpin, was Yisrael and Yaakov. And in Kabbalah, Ze'er Anpin is the partzuf of the Midot. And it has a backside in the world of Atzilut. We said it has a dark side. And the whole dark side of Ze'er Anpin is this soul of Og, from which comes out Eliezer. The whole backside of Ze'er Anpin is this partzuf, which is called Og, the general partzuf, from which comes out Eliezer as the good part of it, the original good part of it. It's also all related to Lot. So again, this is a tremendous topic in the writings of the Arizal, that one of the deepest things that has to do, just one point that he emphasizes greatly. The front side is called Yisrael and Yaakov had 4 wives, whose initial spell Barzel, Bilha Rachel Zilpadaya, the 2 mothers and the two shvachot, what do you call them? Og, what does it say about Og? Haso Eretz Barzel. His crib, according to the interpreters, it says when he was an infant, his crib was tremendously great, and they couldn't make his crib out of wood, because any wooden crib that they tried to make for Og, he broke. He broke the wood. So they had to make him a crib out of iron when he was an infant. And that crib, which is called Eretz Barzel, that's in the Torah. That word Barzel is just like he's the other side of Ze'er Anpin, the dark side, that has to be redeemed also. So his crib are his 4 anti-wives, the initials of which spell Bilha, Rachel, Zilpah, Leah. There's a whole long Sikha of the Rebbe that the 3rd temple that we're waiting for will be constructed from iron. The 2 temples up until now you can't use iron, because iron represents the sword, which is a symbol of death. But the 3rd temple, Bila Hamavet LaNetzach, there's no more death. So iron becomes the most important of the metals. And it will be used, and it represents the 4 wives, the 4 holy wives of Partzuf and Ze'er Anpin, which is Yisrael v'Yaakov. But the Og is this anti-principle of Moshe Rabbeinu, the final anti-principle that Moses has to overcome and kill him. And thereby, together with him, it becomes Mashiach ben David. After Mashiach ben Yosef. So how much is it together? Abraham plus Eliezer is 566, and Moshe plus Og is 424. It's 990. 990, that's the triangle of 44, the sum of all numbers from 1 to 44. 990, Moshiach ben Yosef, Moshiach ben David, Avraham Eliezer, Moshe Og, but it's all the tikkun of Lot, it says in the Hebrews. Lot is 45. Just like Adam. If I add that number 45 to 990, what does it become? It becomes 1035, 1035, which is obviously now the triangle of 45. It's the triangle of Lot himself, because 990 was the triangle of 44. If I add 45, it now becomes the triangle of 45. The triangle of 45 Ma is 3 times Moshe. It's all becomes part of Moshe. 3 Moshe. 3 Moshe is 5 times light. The 5 lights of the first day of creation. Those 5 lights are 3 times Moses. And it's the triangle of Ma, V'nachnu Ma, V'adam. And it's when Lot, who is 45, is added to Mashiach, to Avraham Eliezer, and to Moshe Og. So that's concluding this pearl, this pnina of gematria of these souls. So maybe already be after all of these tikkunim, that Moses kills Og, וליהודים הייתה אורה ושמחה וששון ויקר, Mordechai. Much more, it's a great thing to enter paradise alive, but there's something even higher than that. So we should get to that level which is higher than that. Together with that, you can also have that level together with the higher level, the 2 levels of Atik, the Chaim, So let's conclude with the nigun of the Rabbi. One of the Rabbi taught us 10 different nigunim. One of them is Anim Shmirot. Anim Shmirot. Ta נשיכם לה בצל ידיך לא דש כל עשיך נשיכם לה בצל ידיך לא דש כל עשיך. Moshe said that maybe someone wants to contribute something to our meeting.
Maybe a few words about what can be done. The meaning was to maybe say something about what can be done in Los Angeles, some ideas.
Los Angeles is a big augment of Chabad.
You have to find the motion to defend it. Yeah, Aviv Moshe also.
My father's name is Moshe.
Same thing. Avraham Aviv ben Moshe. You have Avram and you have Moshe.
Rabbi Moshe, something happened to me in Los Angeles. May I give this?
ראיתי מהדורה קודמת שזה, כן? או לא? או שזה משהו אחר? זה משהו יפה מאוד. עוד מישהי שעשתה משהו לא מציאות. זאת אומרת, זה משהו אחר. מה?
מישהי כאן בארץ.
יופי. יפוץ מנתך החוצה.
מעיינותייך.
מנתייך, כן. זה משהו יפה, יפה מאוד מאוד. I opened up Tet's physical beauty. Sounds like a peacock.